I'd like to call to order the January 21st, 2021 regular meeting of the Building Board of Appeals. Call to order. Deborah, can we have a roll call?
Catherine Cousins.
Here.
Hugh Flack.
Here.
Robert Hart.
Here.
Paul Darling.
Here.
Jeff Perkins.
Here.
David Arnsdorf. And Bruce Carson is going to be absent. We do have enough for a quorum.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion for that?
Move to approve the agenda.
We got a second from Jeff, looks like.
Got it.
Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The agenda is approved. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the November 19th, 2020 meeting. Was there any comments on those minutes? I think I had seen some electronically that we did some review. Have those been picked up and we're good to go?
Yeah, I believe so. I'll check that for sure.
Can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes.
A second?
I'll second.
Okay, those in favor? Aye.
Okay.
The minutes
Aye.
from the November 19th meeting are approved. So before we begin the first appeal here, I'd like to explain the process to the applicant. How it works is we first have a staff report that the building department will give, and then we'll have give the applicant an opportunity to present their appeal. And then the staff will have a chance to respond to any comments from the applicant's presentation. Then we'll open up to the board members to ask some questions to the applicant and discuss it among themselves. And then the board will make a motion, and then we'll vote on the motion. And we need a majority to pass, for the motion to pass. So in this case, we have 5 board members present, so we need to have 3 positive votes for it to pass. And there is, if the applicant wishes to appeal the motion of the vote of the board, they can do that so to the state. And there's certain time limits for that you can follow up with Len Dempsey about if we're in that, you wish to appeal that. Any questions about that? Okay, with that, we can begin with a staff report from the building department.
Yep. So the background on the property, 830 Henry, it's a mixed use building containing R2, A3, B, and S2 occupancy classifications. 830, it has been approved for some occupancy. Only unit 11 has a non-compliant stairway. At final inspection, unit 11, the inspector cited that the stairway measures 35 inches, which does not meet the minimum requirements of section 1011.2, exception 1, which requires a stairway be not less than 36 inches. The applicant's requesting relief from this code requirement. Staff recommends the application be denied. It doesn't meet the standards for approval. The code has not been misinterpreted. The provisions of the code do apply, and the reduction in the stairway width is less safe than what is required by the 2015 Michigan Building Code. While the applicant states the unit was designed as a townhouse, this isn't possible in a multi-use building. The 2015 Michigan Residential Code is a standalone code, and it only pertains to single-family homes, duplexes, and townhouses. It offers no provisions for mixed-use structures. The introduction of the 2015 Michigan Residential Code states, this comprehensive standalone residential code establishes minimum regulations for 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses using prescriptive provisions. Townhouse is defined as a single family dwelling unit that's constructed in a group of 3 or more attached units, each extending from foundation to roof, and then has a yard or public way on at least 2 sides. 830 Henry does not meet this definition, therefore is not a townhouse. The mixed use nature of the building includes R2, A3, B, and S2. This has increased safety concerns from what would be considered in the 2015 Michigan Residential Code, which is why it's regulated by the building code and not the residential code. Because 830 is under the purview of the 2015 Michigan Residential Code, it must comply with the minimum code requirements of that building code. The intent of the code is to establish minimum requirements to provide a reasonable level of safety, public health, and general welfare. The building code clearly states that the minimum width of a stairway is 44 inches. That can be reduced to 36 inches if an occupancy load of less than 50 applies. With these things considered, the residential code is not intended for use in commercial buildings. It's a standalone code that is not to become the standard when requirements of the building code are not being met. Because to the 2015 Michigan Building Code is a minimum standard, and the code governing this project, it doesn't meet the standards for approval. The code has not been misinterpreted. The provisions of the 2015 Michigan Building Code do apply, and the reduced stairway width is neither equal to or better than the code requirements.
All right, thank you. So the next up is for the applicant to make the presentation, and I would like to remind them that the board can't waive the code. We have 3 vehicles to granting variance. The first one being that the true intent of the code or the rules governing the construction haven't been interpreted correctly. Provisions of the code don't apply, or you're performing a equal or better form of construction. So when you make your presentation, indicate which one of those 3 methods you're following. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Rob Burrows with OX Studio, representing my client, the building owner, Heidi Pocher, who's here or available as well. Thank you for your time. I do want to clarify the building was permitted, and my statements provided were creating a position in reflection of the Michigan Building Code, not the MRC. I recognize Mr. Dempsey's clarification of the definition of townhome or townhouse, and I'm not challenging that. We have a very unique circumstance in regards to this. This is an 11-unit development, 10 of which have been provided TCO to date. They are functionally, we'll call them kissing sisters. They're identical units that stack in a 3-floor walk-up variation, akin in design palette, which is probably my better way of putting it, to a townhouse in terms of their layout and displacement. Unit 11 is slightly different. It is still likewise a similar concept with interconnected levels, but again with its own unique access point to the exterior. Our unique situation, and I'll drill down to the standard for approval as I kind of summarize some of these points without taking too much time. We have provided documentation, I should point out, both as-built drawings, design drawings or permit drawings, and of course the narrative in support of that as well. I wanted to also confirm that there was a supplementary document that was solicited and provided earlier today. I just want to make sure the commissioners had the opportunity to see that. I can use that as a talking point. In fact, that would be an excellent initial talking point if we could. This is a quick summary of the installed stairs in question. This is unit 11. The main entry level is from the other documents, what's called the first level. That's a staired access, single egress unit. The meaning that the main or first level is our primary egress point out of the building. Per those, thank you, Deborah. I appears you're coming too close to sharing that.
Is that the right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It would be the other one. I'm sorry. I thought you was attached. Yes, it would be this one. If you wouldn't mind just enlarging that so we could see it a little more holistically. There's two stairs that are in question. Excuse me, reducing the size, enlarging the sheet so we could see the whole document. That would be grand. Thank you. Without getting into the rest of the floors, without getting the rest of the diagrams, we can talk off of this for the most part because it's relatively straightforward. There's a stair on the lower half of the drawing going down to the lower level, which is the basement level or garage level of the development. It is where the sleeping areas, the bedrooms of this particular unit are located. There's 3 bedrooms and a small common area associated with this. The primary egress path is through the stair to the main level. The upper stair goes to a rooftop terrace. Regrettably, both were constructed with incredibly tight construction tolerances. And that's where I want to spend a little bit of time reviewing and discussing them. Basically, this unit is separated from the garage level and upper stories by upper joining units, should point out, by a 3-hour separation assembly. In regards to the vertical separation between it and the garage, it's a 3-hour cast in place wall. In regards to the horizontal separation, it's a 3-hour precast and composite cast in place system that in effect creates a fully sandwich type system. That's a 10-inch concrete plank, which is the primary structural floor system. It is basically the stair basically runs between those planks, and then what we call the topping course, which is 2 layers of cast in place concrete, which sandwich an insulation level between them. That's spread throughout the entire floor plate system itself. There's also a curb at either end, both to frame the opening itself, as well as to support, provide bearing components for what you see on the right hand of that image, which is a 2-hour vertical separation assembly, which is a consistent separation design that separates all of the individual units, including unit 11 in this case from unit 10. And then on the west side of it, which is just conventional load, it's conventional load bearing, but it's not a rated wall assembly. So I do want to point out that this building is separated in no less than 2 hours, 2-hour separation from all the adjoining properties or adjoining units themselves, as well as the garage. The garage is clearly 3-hour separation. To support that opening on the east side, there is and the weight of the double wall construction, which is our 2-hour separation wall up above. There's a W8 by 31 beam running north to south, and the columns to support that. Functionally below that level, these walls are encased, are non-structural for the most. They are non-structural. The walls are basically unrated framing with 1/2-inch gypsum boards around. The upper level is a load-bearing wall on the west side that is supporting the terrace up above. This drills down to the real meat of the issue at hand. The planks are a precast system. I don't know the total count. It had to be in the hundreds in terms of what was ultimately installed on this plinth or this platform that separates the garage or lower level from the beginning of the residential units up above. This was designed with an opening with a 3-foot finish tolerance. When the planks are laid out, there was minimal tolerance after installation. And we have a condition now ultimately that has rendered this 1-inch deficient in terms of the minimum 36-inch width for both the lower level stair and the upper level stair. We acknowledge the code concerns and the findings. There's no challenge to that effect. What I do want to point out is that some of the conditions that rendered this outcome ultimately. The eastern side is what we term incredibly static, meaning it cannot move based upon both the plank condition, the curb condition, and the thicknesses of the walls for the vertical fire separation between those. During construction, it was noted that the tolerances were exceedingly tight. The contractor confirmed with me just earlier today again that he was in touch with Kirkstra, who is the precast manufacturer. He was given direction that he could remove upwards of 1.5 inches of that be the right side of that plank that you see depicted here. You'll see there's rebar running in the lower quadrant of that section. He removed 1.5 inches. That initial rebar is 1 15/6 inches from the original outside terminus of that precast plank itself. So that renders it would give me less than a ½ inch tolerance, which was acceptable for them. Any further would have we would be cutting into basically or dangerously inhibiting the structural capacity of that plank. We'd have to remove the rebar itself. So ultimately, that is what is bringing us to you today. The condition was limited through the kind of the repetitive nature of how these planks were laid. Was maximized by the repetitive nature. The contractor did attempt to self-correct during the construction phase. Regrettably, to a point where he could take it per Kirkster's direction without endangering the structural stability or structural conditions of the plank itself. The only area that could be touched was that western side or the left side as you're viewing it right now. Obviously, excuse the term, autopsying it afterwards to try to assist and deliberate your deliberations in regards to the outcome and seeing if there's any opportunity for discussion on this topic. And again, this is not in reference to the Michigan Residential Code, but rather the MBC. We did take the exception. Exception 1 of, I don't have the number in front of 1011.2. We took exception 1 allowed underneath that. We are less than a 50 occupant load. In fact, our occupant load based upon a maximum occupancy by zoning, which is 6 occupants. Building code will allow 8 by square footage measurements, but we're allowed a maximum of 6 by zoning for a dwelling unit. We would have the extreme low end of the scale, if you will, if you're calibrating them on the scale of 50 occupants to 1. So obviously, the other element related to the stairs is, as I took a deep dive into the code and commentary, is the relationship of two-way travel and the requirements for those widths to accommodate two-way travel. We have a very unique situation in this case where our primary means of egress is basically travel upwards on the stair to the main level for egressing out of this. If there were an emergency situation on that lower level, the basement level, if you will, where the bedrooms are located, as I mentioned earlier, that in effect has each of those units, as well as that common area on the lower level, have egress windows out of each one of them. So there's 3 egress windows, 1 for each of the bedrooms and a 4th for that common area. So in a collective whole, while I understand egress windows and wells are part of a means of egress and not a singular means of egress unto themselves, there is an opportunity for that alternate means of emergency escape through those windows in the case of a fire situation. Conversely, the stairs coming down from the terrace, I should point out as well, is for, in particular, the tenant use, the residential use. It's not a common terrace. That terrace was likewise has that 35-inch width challenge. That is likewise the opposite direction of travel. It's coming down as opposed to up. But basically, we have a confluence of our primary means of egress to the main level, where we have already a dedicated single means of egress out of the space. So I can't imagine an emergency situation, particularly from the lower level, that there could be a set of emergency service professionals, that there would be a conflict of two-way traffic on the stair. I think that is the primary arguments that we're attempting to make, and I do believe that it is speaking candidly as a professional, it is very unique for me to come up with a standard of approval. The one I presented or petitioned as part of this application was the provisions of the code do not apply. I was rejected, but I do believe that there is a tolerance inherently in the code based upon the commentary that's been provided for an understanding, if not a true variance aspect, that it will allow this accommodation to take place, and that the safe egressing of people from both the terrace level and the lower level can be accommodated without any deficiencies by the relatively minimal loss of the 1-inch clear dimension on that stair. The only element of the residential code that I was pointing out was a unique adaptation in the residential code, and it's only brought up for the sensibility that there's an interpretation where we could clinically eliminate, again, in the residential code itself, or we can reduce the minimum dimension beneath the handrails down to almost 31 or to 31 inches, assuming a minimum 36-inch stair. The residential code doesn't allow to go less itself than 36 for the finished dimension, but the addition of the handrails allows a minimum reduction. Excuse me, I think it's 4.5 inches for each handrail, so we could ultimately have 9-inch reduction below the handrail itself. That was my only point of reference in bringing up the residential code at all. I apologize for any confusion that might have wrought. With that, I'm happy to provide any additional input or response to your questions to the best of my abilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff, you have any follow-up comments on that? No? Yes.
Sorry. The only thing that I would like to state is that that we're dealing with the minimum code requirements here. The section clearly states, the 44 inches. It gives you the exception down to 36 for the occupant load. I feel like if the intent of the code was to have it below 36, it would have been written that way in the code language. And that's all I'd like to add.
Thank you. Let's open up to the board now for questions for the applicant.
Could you speak to the how the unit is laid out? It looks like the kitchen is on the level 1 portion of the plan, but the garage level shows in the, I guess it's the common area, what looks like cabinet work with a sink. Could you just explain what's going on there? I'm just trying to get a sense of how much communication there is between one level and the other.
Let me flip to that. That would be sheet A401 would be the most, would provide the most clarity in regards to that layout.
Mhm.
Heidi, could you now basically, because that is a common area, it could be an area where there might be a television, there might be an opportunity for people just to gather, but it would be the same residence as would be occupying the bedrooms. Making sure I'm not mute. Thank you. If we get to 401 real quick, I believe that'd be part of the packet, please. Thank you. This page, I believe it's this page. Yes. There's no real pretense behind the sink itself outside of potential use for a coffee pot or something akin to that.
Yeah, that was going to be a wet bar at one point. That actually was not. We did not.
I was going to
not installing that.
Thank you, Heidi, for clarifying. That was not installed. I was going to ask if you could chime in. Thank you.
So on the same plan, the bottom of the stair shows what looks like 3 foot 4.5 clear. Is that also not the case because that's just not the way it was built?
No, if you could, Deborah, if you could zoom in on the bottom of the stair, I can explain what kind of on the fly installation was created. There are, I don't believe that plan was taking into account the column location, which functionally packs out some of that stair. That was obviously a coordination issue during the design phase. You'll see a line, you see a dash line coming down up above the stair. That line basically is a continuation of the partition up above, which forms the east side of that wall, of that stairway wall. That now continues and actually comes down as at handrail height down below.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And my other question, and I don't know if you can see this, is that how the stringers are actually supporting the stair?
They
Like that?
They most likely are embedded to the framing, yes, but they would be running on the sides. That's correct.
Okay, so they're inside the finished wall.
That's correct. They're inside that 1/2 inch of gypsum board.
And
Look at the photographs that were in the packet. It looks like the gypsum board runs past the floor system, past the concrete on the left-hand side.
It does. It does.
So we have that half inch, and then you say you can take a half inch off of the concrete plank. That would get you to the 1 inch.
We took as much off the concrete as we could.
There was approximately an inch and a half removed, leaving just under a half inch remaining of concrete cover before the rebar was struck. That was a maximum allowed tolerance by Kirkstra. So portions of that plank were removed. The tolerance, if that plank had been left in place, would have been much tighter, at least an inch and a half. So yes, the drywall on both sides, the gypsum board, excuse me, on both sides does run along the face of.
And the one on the left-hand side of the picture here is fire rated assembly, where the one on the right is not fire rated.
That is correct. That is correct, sir.
how wide is the handrail in that photo?
That was I don't know off the top of my head. I didn't. That was actually a owner selection. I don't know if you know off the top of your head either.
Well, I guess
I believe it's code compliant. That was confirmed. I don't know. I honestly didn't measure that when I went out to confirm dimensions myself. I apologize.
Code compliant in terms of the grip.
Yes.
But was there a specific idea you had in mind in terms of how that could?
Well, I'm assuming that you have and this is from a purely practical point of view, in that the stair, the way I see it, the handrail kind of encroaches on the usable width of the stair.
That is true.
So if you have your 1.5 inch finger clearance, and let's say you had, I think the minimum railing is 1.5 inches around.
1.5 inches, that's correct.
Do you pick up anything?
I would say so. I believe that's a molded 2x, so that would be 3.5 by itself. So we're probably easily 4 inches, 4.5 beyond the face of wall. So we could easily pick up an 1.5 inch dimension through modification of the handrail itself.
That would create more space for sure.
Absolutely.
I think it solves the problem of the wall-to-wall space.
But it does minimize the overall encroachment of the handrail into that dimension.
Very much so, and that would be obviously an easy fix to make.
Correct.
So in this photo, in the photograph there, down below the floor height there, you could shift that over 1 inch because it's the columns back from the finish there. Once you get past the floor thickness height, you could make it the right width because you furred that wall out. And that's not fire rated down below the floor deck.
Kind of like that pony wall that sticks out.
That's right. Where we basically have the handrail on the left-hand side, I think is Mr. Darling's referencing. Yes, that could be modified at the down below.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Paul, are you talking about just modifying that one wing wall at the bottom?
Ideally, you could move the one here to the right, move that over 1 inch, and and then maybe the board comes down and you see the exposed edge of plank that you paint there, and it continues down, so you maximize. You don't lose the 1/2 inch finish for the board there. I don't know how much you're going to get 36 inches. Assuming they must have been aware of it because they've already taken the 1.5 inches off during construction before they put the wall up. So it seemed like they knew it was an issue prior to the finish.
If I may, Heidi, one of the talking points we had earlier, I could express would be owing to the very tight tolerances and the want to make this as close, if not fully code compliant. There could be an option of replacing sections of that drywall with a thinner drywall. This is 1/2 inch. And again, even on the firewall side, the way the system is designed, it's functionally the shaft wall. That is the fire rating component. The finished surface is a finished surface. And I believe I'd have to double check that on that side, but minimally the right side, which would be the west side of the wall, could be reduced to 1/4-inch board potentially, if that would assist, add additional comfort to anyone's perspective.
I'm a little disoriented here. In that photo that we're looking at, which is the 3-hour or the 2-hour rated wall, and which
To the left, at the beginning, at the top of the top stair tread that you see. Thank you, Deborah, for putting your cursor on it.
Hey, Rob, maybe it would be helpful just in terms of the narrative of how that wall relates to the rest of the building. Explain why that would be a 2-hour fire rated wall and not the one to the right.
Yeah, that there is not on the lower level, but all the way up on the beginning on the main or first level, all continuing through the second level is another unit. All of these units were designed with a formal and intentionally designed UL rated 2-hour fire separation assembly. So the continuation of that was essential, and was one of the trigger points to maintain that dimension ultimately.
Does that 2-hour wall take a 2x6 stud? Can it be handled with a 2x4 stud? I see you have 2x6 studs built there. I don't know if you gain any more space by shaving some off that stud down to a, 2x4 on the one side.
I
Gotta be UL is a problem, but yeah.
It does, and I do not have the UL open. I could quickly research that, but my understanding is part of the intention of that is to create a separation from the exterior face.
Yeah.
I don't know if the minimum is 6 or if it's 4.
Yeah.
That's my only delta.
Yeah. I mean, if a 2x4 stud wall, 2x6, 2x4 were, gaining potentially more.
I would like to go back to Mr. Darling's comment for a moment, if we could. And I do want to make sure that everybody understands that short of disassembling the entire building, we will take any kind of a decision and guidance in terms of modifying things to create space. But just reflecting on the observation that we took as much off that cantilevered plinth, the concrete, as possible. We did do that. And then subsequent to that, there were 2 inspections. So, we will bear some real expense in terms of mitigating this and rebuilding it in whatever way you see fit so that we can meet with the requirement. But on the other hand, I kind of feel like the city's a little bit in the boat with us here because we got through 2 inspections. And we have a good relationship with our inspector, and I think our inspector has always been very communicative with us, and we've been very transparent. And yet here we are. So to fix this, we're going to have to, if you allow us to fix it, we're going to have to go to some significant expense to fix it. So I don't know how that accounts or plays into any part of this decision. But I would think that might have some bearing on how this whole thing was viewed. If I can say that with the greatest respect possible for the people that have worked hard to help us get to this point from the city.
Well, I mean, realistically, to replace the drywall, I think you can only really do it on one side, right?
To preserve the fire separation, yes, that's correct.
So the other side where you could go with thinner drywall, you can't shave anything off the precast that's there.
That's right. So even if we eliminated drywall in its entirety on the right side of this image, we would still be gaining no more than a ½ inch because of where that ultimate face of the precast plank is at this time.
Yeah. So practical things that we could do, I think we've already been mentioned. We could exchange out the drywall on the right-hand side and gain a ½ inch. We can change the handrail to not necessarily correct the problem, but just mechanically create more space. And then for the 8 steps at the bottom or so, where there's a half wall, we could move that wall out so that the impact is, reduced by 1/3.
I'm wondering if anybody has looked into the possibility in the sketch on the left-hand side is I presume that's the plank that you're talking about, that you've either already shaved a portion of it down. I guess to clarify, is that correct? You've cut a portion of that plank off?
Yes, that approximately 1.5 inches of that plank have been removed already.
All right, so the plank manufacturer is saying that's as far as you can go without taking alternative measures. So I'm wondering why the wall beneath couldn't be turned into a bearing wall to support that edge of the plank and cut more of the plank off, put in a new wall that would become a bearing wall that would pick up that edge of the plank, and then cut more of the plank off if that strand is if you're within so many millimeters or whatever of the strand, if you support the plank from underneath, then that strand is no longer critical.
Rob, what's the footer situation under there?
I'm checking just to look at the slab plan right now. So let me flip to, excuse me for going out of vision for a minute.
Because I think we had to pour a footer for that steel beam. So that's
Most assuredly did. There's the columns, I think is what you're referencing, Heidi. And yes, there are footings underneath. I think there might be 2 columns along the length of that wall on the east side.
Just to be clear, I was referring to the left-hand side in the sketch, and if I misstated it, I apologize.
The extreme would be you just take 8 inches off. You take one whole core width of that off. You cut to the middle of the core, and then the next bar over has a lot of space to the piece.
What does that do to that hallway, Rob? I'm not sure we have that much space because of the hallway that goes through there. If that makes sense.
On the main level?
On the bottom level. Well, on the main level too. What's that? It supports the roof. Yeah, it supports all of the it supports a series of common walls up to the roof.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you do that, you'd be replacing the stairs as well, right?
Yeah.
Because the stairs only run from wall to wall right now.
They do.
That's correct.
I mean, for an inch, the finishing could probably cantilever. I don't know where they fill it in. Put a stringer there, finish stringer, fill the gap.
One thing to consider with that already, I think there may have been on the supplemental sketch, there is that I sent along earlier today with the overall sketch or supplemental information. Too many pages in front of me now. There is the way that's designed at either end of the opening is an embedded plate or an embedded angle to support the width. We obviously it would be very unique because we're removing a portion of that plank, yet it continues in both directions beyond the section we'd be removing. I don't know the integrity of that rebar in the other spaces would have to be updated as well. My concern is much like we had the ripple effect of the comedy of errors that led us to this moment. I'm afraid of what might happen if that rebar is cut and how it that then transfers load wise across the rest of that, because it wouldn't be in the same plane. If you can visualize it in plan, we have that width opening, I think it's 14 feet long. We'd only be able to have access to that 14-foot width of section that could be potentially cut out, assuming that Kirkshire would even accommodate it. And I believe that is a grouted core right now, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
Both sides, in fact, are because of the load bearing capacity above.
Yeah.
That would be, I'm just not sure what happens when we get beyond that opening then on either the north or south side, without further investigation.
Can I ask a question? Have we exhausted the whether or not this is an interpretation issue? I know that Rob had one viewpoint, and I'd certainly hear Mr. Lemieux's viewpoint. Has that discussion been exhausted or not?
It looks like in both applications that it says the minimum is 36, depending on what code you're in, it still says 36 minimum, and we don't have that, so.
Mm-hmm. Rob, is that?
Yeah, there's, I as much as I would love to say I have a great alternative argument, the code is very clear, Heidi, that the 36 is a minimum dimension.
I just wanted to make sure, because
No,
I understood the directions right from the get-go.
Yeah.
From Mr. Darling, and I wanted to make sure we're not working outside of that.
Of course.
So one question I have for the building department is the concern within the width of the stair alone? I mean, is there anything else that they can do to mitigate the egress situation in this unit?
And I'm a little bit confused as to what the question is.
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, if they were to introduce any other means of egress, for example, like on the level 1 floor plan, like say there was a second door out, would that make a difference?
Are you saying like turn one of the egress windows into a proper exit door, maybe?
I'm looking at the back of the stair on level 1, where the bathroom is.
Oh, right.
Is there an opportunity to put a stair to the exterior at that point?
I don't know that there's a code route to get there. I don't know of any allowance to reduce a minimum stair width based on exits. If I'm answering your question.
Well, I do think that there is an opportunity to create a primary means of egress out of this level, which would render it compliant. The stair that's presently constructed would be just a communicating stair at that point. I think that maybe, and I apologize, sorry, your screen title doesn't give your clear name. That was a great question.
Call me Donna. That's okay.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm Bob.
I suspected it was Bob, but I didn't want to be presumptuous. Donna works too. The bearded lady.
Not Sue.
That there would be some potential for that. There are three. There's a stair. There's a landing already. If you look at the Unit 11 ground level plan, the lower level plan, you'll see the stoop for the stair. You'll see 3 window wells, and then the 4th one's kind of cut off in that section up on the northwest side. There are 3 window wells there. I'm not certain if there's enough run to connect those without challenging. I guess it would almost have to be on that common central window well to accommodate it. Going in any other direction puts us into the garage level. which I don't think is a safer means of egress, because we're not directly exiting to the exterior.
There's way too much mechanical there anyway.
Precisely. I mean, even if we
I think
could,
we formerly had planter boxes, Rob, and now we don't. So that's a second means of egress on the main floor that we could put in. We could put a door there.
Right at the bottom of the stair where it says, but there's a C designation for a small window, and there's something else that says A63.
oh yes, that is a planter box. That's correct.
Oh, that's a planter box.
Yes.
Oh,
It's no longer a planter box.
Well, the original design. Yes.
Right. But I think the point
does
is
the walkway go to the wall? To the
it could,
wall?
yes, the walkway goes directly to the wall. So you could take that window out and put a door in.
Okay, so to the building department, what I was getting at is if they'll, to try to achieve something that's some kind of equivalency in terms of safety, would that mitigate the 1-inch deficiency in the stair? In addition,
With the idea being that it doesn't require two people going up and down the stairs at the same time, potentially?
along those lines, because
Okay.
because quite frankly, the whole 2 people up and down the stair rationale, I don't really see it, because the fact that the kitchen's on the main level, I see a lot of traffic there. And frankly, that terrace, it looks like an invitation for a much bigger group gathering. Let's put it that way. So what I'm trying to suggest is, if there's a second door on the main level, does that in any way help mitigate the stair situation and make it an easier situation as far as, getting people out quickly?
I would honestly have to do the code research on an alternative like that before I could give an accurate answer.
Okay, this is what I'm talking about.
What page is that in the packet? I can bring it up.
401.
401, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
Page 42 of the packet.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so Deborah, see where that like stop sign is? It says C on the left, just inside the red box.
Yeah.
Go straight up with your pointer, and now a little bit to the right. That's right there.
Yeah, right
That's
there.
where
The landing area for the stair.
Yeah.
Correct.
Which it looks like that landing area is big enough, I believe.
It is.
I think if the applicant wanted to propose something else as far as an alternate form of construction, that would be fine. I don't know if it's the board's action to come up with a solution to solve the problem as far as the lack of 36 inches.
we sure don't want to propose something that is outside the purview of what the building department would feel comfortable approving. So,
I mean, we do have the option, we could table this if you want to come up with more options that we can consider, or we can make a motion now and, vote on it. So there's a couple ways we could do it. If you want to explore other options as a ways to improve the width of the stair or egress, you can do that. I think the next meeting would be in a month.
mhm.
Or else you're going to go to the variance to the state, or you can reapply with another variance to the city if we took action today.
Right. Well, I mean, and not to make the sausage in front of all of you guys, but just netting it out and listening to your guidance in terms of where you have capabilities and where you don't. I don't think that we've made an argument that allows you to say yes. So I think probably, Rob, what we should do is table this, hoping that we can explore with, for example, Mr. Lemieux, whether adding another means of egress to where that window is makes the staircase now some kind of almost auxiliary, third way out as opposed to a primary way out. Does that make sense?
It does to me.
Yeah, I mean, I would need to be presented with a code path that gets us there.
Okay.
So I would need to be
Yeah.
shown through the code language how we get from that exit to a reduction in a stair width.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want to make the investment in making this right. We're not, we're in no way coming here and saying, hey, it's only an inch, so can you be flexible? I know you can't. But maybe what we can come up with you, Michael, since I have you here, and I can just talk to you for a sec, is come up with a second means of egress for that main floor, and then maybe even a door possibly in the basement, so that there's a primary, and then in that sitting room area, and then there's a second means out of the bedrooms through the egress windows.
I'm going to need to see, and I just don't know it off the top of my head, or if it exists, that doing that allows you to reduce the width of a stairway. And I feel like we keep going back to that. It's in my opinion that the stairway width needs to be corrected.
Mhm.
But if you can,
I guess what I'm saying is that there needs to be two means of egress. And I think maybe what Mr. Hart is trying to get us to is that if the stairway isn't a primary means of egress, then
Or
what's that?
the supplemental means of egress, even those,
Right. Exactly. I think
emergency
that's-
egress, at least.
Does that make sense, Rob, what I'm saying?
It does.
It's actually what he's saying, not what I'm saying. It's his idea.
The interpretation thereof.
Yeah,
But we would, yes, it does make sense to me.
okay. So I think, if you're asking me if I'd like to table to explore that, assuming that it would be helpful to get the building department's concurrence, that they could work through this with us in time to revisit next month, hopefully with a proposal to indeed be able to classify that stairwell as supplementary. I think that is the best course of action here. And I appreciate every person on this call and their input to try to help us get this figured out in the proper way.
Now, are these buildings sprinkled right now? Are the units fire suppressed?
They are.
There's every form of fire suppression man has thought of in these units. Yeah. There's Den's glass, there's sprinkling, there's
Yeah.
Yeah, we're fire rated, fire suppressed, 3 hours between
fire collars everywhere, paid attendant with standing by with a hose, the whole nine.
So sometimes we'll see that you're providing additional level of protection that
Mhm.
wasn't required to help you compensate for this, but if it's already required to be suppressed, you wouldn't get that benefit, you wouldn't get that.
Right. Well, and I think that's where the kind of the hybrid commercial residential interpretation really came in. So if these buildings weren't sitting on top of a garage, which we had to build because we needed parking, right?
Yeah.
Then all of this extra that we put in would be over and above. And we still have the plinth separation, which is huge, and all the fire collars that go through. So I guess we could kind of add that in as as some supplemental encouragement. But you're right, I don't know that it gives us extra points in the argument.
If it's required anyway, required anyways, it's not supplement, it's not in addition to what is required. It's if there are things that
sure.
we want to
Yeah.
do, And if you wanted to look at, if there are ways to move that wall over, make the wall thinner, the non-party wall, if you've exhausted those options to take on the finish off or something like that, that would be good to know.
Yeah, I mean, the question is can we safely get there and meet your requirement of, like you said, you don't have the option to just waive it. So I don't know if we can get to 36 is a problem.
If you get to 36, you wouldn't need the variance anymore. So
Right.
Exactly.
if you can get to 36, that's ideal. If you can't, come back with something that you're proposing. That's most as you can get to 36, and with something else that helps compensate
Right.
for that.
So I think the safest alternative is to try to figure out a way to get comfortable around making that stairwell a supplementary stairwell.
I believe Jeff has a question. Has his hand up?
Yeah, I just want to be clear from my perspective when and if this comes back, that I personally don't agree that a second means of egress on that main level, or whatever you call that level, is mitigates the problem. And so if Michael finds a pathway in the code that says that providing that mitigates the problem, then fine. But if in the absence of that, I'm not willing to waive the width requirements on the stair. And so I just want to be clear that to go through a lot of effort to add a door to it, and if you bring that back, I'm going to vote against it.
You don't have full knowledge of how the people on the board feel, about granting a variance. It's just exploring. You won't know that till we take a vote to a certain point, but.
No, my point was that from my perspective, I would hate to see the petitioner go through a bunch of difficulty adding a doorway that I'm going to vote against anyway. I can't speak for the rest of the board. So personally, I would like to see some alteration made to the structure to get to the 36 inches, and then you don't need the variance, because I'm not willing to stick my neck out to. There are certain things in the code that I would be willing to bend on, but width of a stairway is just not one of them. So I just want to make my position clear, so you know where at least one vote's going to be on this board.
You definitely want to have your variance before you proceed with any kind of alternate measure.
Obviously, yeah, we would never go to the expense of actually putting a door in without knowing that it was going to solve the problem.
And to be clear too, I don't know of a code path that gets you a reduced stair width. I'm just not aware of that.
So if the applicant wants to make a request to table it, we can have a motion that way. The board, someone on the board can make a motion to table this application until we get additional information.
Sounds good.
Kindly request that we're tabled then, please.
All right. Bob, you want to make a motion to table this?
I move that in the case of DBA 21-001, that the appeal for variance is tabled until our next meeting, pending further research on behalf on the part of the applicant, in conjunction with the department buildings.
Have a second? Can somebody second the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Those in favor? Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, this motion is tabled until we have additional information from the applicant.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. The next item on the agenda is next item on the agenda is item E2. Board discussions. Any old business that we want to talk about for the board?
All, if I could, I neglected to enter the staff that was in attendance in the record, if I could do so now.
Okay,
Okay. We have Brandy Lewis, Jamie Worthington, John Weiser, Mark Howell, Michael Redmond, Glenn Dempsey, Janet Farrell, Gary Wolke, and myself, Deborah Williams. Thank you.
all right, thank you. Is there any new business that the board has? Seeing none. Any reports and communication? Any public commentary? Any
No
public-
one in the waiting room.
No one in the waiting room? Okay. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you. Those in favor? Aye. Anyone
Aye.
opposed? All right, we are adjourned, 2:34. Thank you.